I welcome you once again today, folks. Today's experience is entirely different from any experience we received in the past years. Brother Samuel, in his experience, split a dark secret Jesus revealed to him about the Jehovah Witness organization. Kindly comment from where you are watching from, so we can get to know each other, even though we may be far. I will begin reading this experience. God bless you. My name is Brother Samuel, and I had been a Jehovah's Witness for over 20 years. I was what they called an elder in our Kingdom Hall, which meant I was one of the men who helped make important decisions for our church. I spent my days teaching people from door to door, leading Bible studies, and helping other members of our congregation understand what we believed were God's true teachings. I felt very proud of my position. I thought I knew the truth about God better than most people. Every week I would sit with the other elders, and we would decide who could get baptized, who needed discipline, and how our church should be run. I believed with all my heart that our organization was the only way to reach God. During our elder meetings, we would discuss many serious matters. Sometimes we had to decide if someone who had broken one of our rules should be disfellowshipped, which meant they would be cut off from all contact with their family and friends in the congregation. I remember feeling the weight of these decisions, believing we were acting as God's representatives on earth. I was also part of the judicial committees that would meet with people who had questions about our teachings or who had done something wrong. We would sit across from them, sometimes for hours, asking detailed questions about their personal lives and their faith. I thought this was what God wanted us to do to keep the congregation clean and pure. I had given up many things for my faith. I had turned down job promotions that would have required me to work during our meeting nights. I had stopped talking to family members who had left the organization. I had even encouraged my own children to avoid going to college so they could spend more time in the preaching work. But then something happened that changed everything. One winter morning, I woke up feeling very sick. My chest hurt badly, and I could barely breathe. At first I thought it might just be stress from all my responsibilities at the Kingdom Hall. We had been dealing with some difficult cases lately, and I had been losing sleep over some of the decisions we had to make. But as the morning went on, the pain got worse. My left arm started to tingle, and I felt dizzy and nauseous. My wife's sister Ruth saw how pale I looked and immediately called for an ambulance. As we waited for help to arrive, I remember thinking about all the people in our congregation who were depending on me, and I worried about missing our important elder meeting that evening. The ambulance ride felt like it took forever. The paramedics were asking me questions and putting oxygen over my face, but all I could think about was how this might affect my service to the organization. I had always been taught that faithful servants of God would be protected, and I wondered if this sickness meant I had done something wrong. When we arrived at the hospital, everything happened very quickly. Doctors and nurses surrounded me, speaking in medical terms I didn't understand. They wheeled me into a room filled with scary machines and bright lights. My wife rushed me to the hospital, and the doctors said I was having a serious heart attack. They worked on me for hours trying to save my life. As I lay on that hospital bed, with machines beeping all around me, I started to feel very strange. The pain in my chest was getting worse, but at the same time, I felt like I was becoming lighter, as if my body was losing weight. The voices of the doctors and nurses seemed to be getting farther and farther away. Then something amazing happened that I had never experienced before and couldn't have imagined. I felt myself lifting up, like I was floating above my own body. I could see the doctors working on me below, and my wife crying in the corner. But strangely, I wasn't scared anymore. Instead, I felt more peaceful than I had ever felt in my whole life. From above, I could see everything that was happening in the room. I watched the doctors using electric paddles on my chest, trying to get my heart beating properly again. I saw my wife holding my hand and praying desperately. I could even see the tears streaming down her face, and I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't figure out how to get back to my body. Suddenly, I found myself moving away from the hospital room. I was traveling through what looked like a tunnel of bright, warm light. It wasn't like anything I had ever seen on Earth. The walls seemed to shimmer with colors that don't even have names, and the light wasn't harsh like the fluorescent lights in the hospital, but gentle and welcoming. As I moved through this tunnel, I felt all the worries and stress from my life as an elder melting away. I wasn't thinking about meeting schedules or judicial committees, or who needed to be counseled. Instead, I felt surrounded by a love that was deeper and more complete than anything I had ever experienced. At the end of this path, I saw a figure waiting for me. As I got closer, I knew immediately who it was, even though he looked different from the pictures I had seen in our Watchtower publications. It was Jesus Christ himself. His face was so kind and loving, and his eyes seemed to look right into my heart. He didn't look angry or disappointed with me, despite all the mistakes I had made. Instead, his expression was full of love and understanding. Jesus was wearing a simple white robe that seemed to glow with its own light. His hair was longer than I had imagined, and his skin had a warmth to it that made me feel completely safe. But it was his eyes that affected me the most. They were full of compassion, and when he looked at me, I felt like he could see every thought I had ever had, every decision I had ever made, and every doubt I had ever hidden. Jesus spoke to me, but not with words that I heard with my ear. It was like his thoughts became my thoughts, and I understood everything perfectly. The communication was clearer than any conversation I had ever had with another person. He began by telling me that he had been watching me for many years, and that he knew my heart. He revealed to me that he understood I had been trying to serve God faithfully, but that I had been deceived about some very important things. He said this with such gentleness that I didn't feel condemned, but rather I felt relieved that someone finally understood the confusion I had been carrying. Jesus revealed to me that there were three things that people were being taught about salvation that were not true and were not from him. He showed me that some religious groups were teaching that only certain people would go to heaven, that you had to belong to a specific organization to be saved, and that you could earn your way to God through good works and following rules made by men. As he explained these things to me, I began to understand that much of what I had been teaching for 20 years was based on these false ideas. I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because I realized I had been leading people away from the simple truth, but relief because finally someone was showing me what was really true. Then, Jesus began to reveal to me the dark secrets about the teachings I had been following for so many years. My heart felt heavy as he showed me three main problems with Jehovah's Witness doctrine. But he helped me understand each one with patience and love. First, he revealed to me that the teaching about only 44,000 people going to heaven was wrong. He showed me that this number in the Bible was symbolic, not literal, and that his invitation to live with him forever was open to all people who truly believed in him, not just a small group. He explained that this teaching had been created to make people feel less special and to give power to a few leaders who claimed to be part of this exclusive group. Jesus showed me how this teaching had hurt so many people in our congregations. He revealed to me that countless faithful believers had been told they weren't good enough to go to heaven, and instead were taught to hope for a lesser reward on earth. He showed me how this made people feel like second-class Christians, and how it created a system where some people were considered more important than others. Second, he revealed to me that the Watchtower organization was not God's only channel of communication on earth. This was one of the most shocking things for me to hear, because I had believed this teaching with all my heart. He showed me that he speaks directly to all his children through his Holy Spirit and through reading the Bible. He explained that no human organization could stand between him and people who wanted to know him. Jesus revealed to me that God's Spirit had been trying to speak to me for years, but I had been taught to ignore it and only listen to what the organization told me. He showed me how many times I had felt something was wrong with certain teachings, but I had pushed those feelings away because I was taught that questioning the organization was the same as questioning God. He revealed to me that the Bible was meant to be understood by ordinary people, not just by a group of men in New York who claimed special authority. He showed me that when people read the Bible with honest hearts, asking for God's help, the Holy Spirit would guide them into truth. Third, he revealed to me the most shocking truth of all. He showed me that the Jehovah's Witnesses were teaching people to worship the organization instead of worshiping God alone. This was hard for me to accept at first, because I had never thought of it that way, But as Jesus explained it to me, I began to see how true it was. He revealed to me that when people were taught, they must never question the leaders, and that leaving the organization meant losing God's love. They were actually being taught to fear and serve men rather than God. He showed me how the organization had placed itself between people and God, making people believe they needed the organization to have a relationship with their Creator. Jesus revealed to me that this was exactly what the Pharisees had done in his time on earth. They had made so many rules and traditions that people couldn't see God's love anymore. They had made themselves the gatekeepers to God, and Jesus had strongly opposed this. He showed me how the organization controlled people through fear, making them afraid to think for themselves or to question anything they were taught. He revealed to me that this fear was not from God, because God's love casts out fear. Jesus revealed to me that many sincere people in the organization truly loved God, but they were being led away from the simple truth of his love. He showed me that salvation comes only through believing in him, not through being part of any organization or following complicated rules. As he spoke these things to my heart, I felt both sad and relieved at the same time. Sad because I realized I had been teaching people things that weren't true, and that I had been part of a system that was hurting people spiritually. But I felt relieved because I finally understood the real truth about God's love, and it was so much simpler and more beautiful than what I had been taught. Jesus revealed to me that all the meetings, all the rules, all the fear about doing everything perfectly were not what God wanted. Instead, he wanted a simple relationship of love and trust. He showed me that his burden was light, not heavy like the burden I had been carrying as an elder. Then Jesus told me something that filled me with hope. He revealed to me that it wasn't too late for me or for others who had been deceived. He showed me that his arms were always open to welcome anyone who wanted to come to him, simply and directly, without going through any organization or following any complicated procedure. He revealed to me that many people would leave the organization once they understood the truth, and that this would be painful, but that he would be with them through it all. He showed me that losing friends and family members who chose to stay in the organization was part of the cost of following him, but that he would provide new relationships and a new family for those who chose to follow him. Just as suddenly as it had begun, I felt myself returning to my body. The bright light faded, and I found myself back in the hospital room. I opened my eyes on that hospital bed, and everything looked different. The machines were still beeping, my wife was still crying, but now I saw everything with new eyes. I felt like I had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at understanding the truth. When I recovered from my heart attack, I knew I had to make some very difficult choices. The doctors said it was a miracle that I had survived, and they couldn't explain how I had recovered so quickly. But I knew it was because Jesus had given me a mission. I couldn't continue teaching things that Jesus himself had shown me were not true. Even though it meant losing many friends and facing rejection from people I had known for years, I decided to follow the real Jesus I had met, not the version I had been taught about. The hardest part was telling my wife what had happened. At first, she thought the heart attack had affected my mind. She couldn't understand why I was suddenly questioning everything we had believed for so many years. She was scared that I was losing my faith, when actually I was finding real faith for the first time. I started by quietly stepping down from my position as an elder. I told the other elders that I needed time to recover from my heart attack, which was true, but I also needed time to figure out how to handle what Jesus had shown me. I began studying the Bible in a completely different way. Instead of starting with our organization's publications and fitting the Bible into what they taught, I started with just the Bible itself. I prayed and asked God to help me understand what he really wanted me to know. What I discovered amazed me. The simple message of God's love that Jesus had shown me was right there in the Bible, but I had been taught to make it so complicated. I realized that for years I had been adding layers of rules and requirements that God never intended. When I finally told my wife about my experience with Jesus and showed her what I was learning from the Bible, she was frightened at first. She was worried about what would happen to us if we left the organization. We had built our whole lives around it. All of our friends were there. Our children had been raised in it. But slowly, as we studied together, she began to see the same things I was seeing. She started to remember doubts she had pushed away over the years, and questions she had been afraid to ask. Together we began to understand that we had been serving an organization instead of serving God. The process of leaving wasn't easy. When we stopped attending meetings regularly, elders came to visit us. They wanted to know if we were having doubts about the truth. When I tried to share some of the things I had learned from the Bible, they became very concerned and warned me about apostate thinking. Eventually, we had to make the difficult decision to formally leave the organization. This meant that all of our friends and some of our family members would no longer speak to us. It meant starting over socially and spiritually, but we knew it was what Jesus wanted us to do. Today, I share this story because I want other people to know that God's love is much bigger and simpler than any organization teaches. You don't need to earn it by going to meetings or preaching a certain number of hours each month. You don't need to belong to a special group. And you don't need to follow complicated rules. You just need to believe in Jesus and accept his love for you. I also want people who are still in the organization to know that if they have doubts or questions, those feelings might be God's Spirit trying to guide them to truth. They don't need to be afraid of thinking for themselves or of studying the Bible without organizational literature. That encounter with Jesus changed my life forever, and I pray it might help others find the real truth about God's amazing love. The Jesus I met was nothing like the distant, rule-focused God I had been taught about. He was full of compassion, understanding, and unconditional love. Now, instead of worrying about organizational rules and requirements, I simply try to love God and love other people. Instead of judging people based on whether they belong to my religion, I try to see them the way Jesus sees them. Instead of living in fear of not being good enough, I rest in the knowledge that Jesus loves me just as I am. My heart attack nearly killed me, but it also saved me from a life of spiritual bondage. I will always be grateful for that day when Jesus reached down and showed me the real truth about his love.